Hi, everybody. Welcome. We are going to be getting started in just 1 minute. All right. I think most folks are in the room. I'm just giving it a few more seconds for everyone to join. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today to learn all about the I Am Here Vital Document Legal Hotline for young people. I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to introduce myself and organization and introduce Jacqueline. We have a lot of folks here today, so please introduce yourself in chat. If you could please put your name, pronouns, what organization you're with, where you are located in the world, and if you want to, include an emoji to show how your day is going so far. We do expect that folks are going to have a lot of questions throughout our presentation. Please put your questions in Q&A and not chat throughout the presentation. And please ask questions about the hotline. But if you have questions about how to access a vital document, such as a birth certificate, please call or text the hotline to get those questions answered. We won't be able to answer those kind of specific questions about how to access a vital doc on this webinar today, but we are happy to answer your questions about how the hotline works, who can call, and all sorts of other questions that you have about the hotline. Also, these slides and a recording of this webinar will be available on our website after the presentation. We also will be providing a survey so you can tell us how we did and how we can improve for future webinars. So this is what we're here to talk about today. 1-888-870-DOCS. It is a hotline you can call, text. The hotline, it is for young people experiencing homelessness to help them attain a state ID or a license, a copy of their social security card or birth certificate, or any documents that are needed to obtain an ID or a license. This hotline is a partnership of Baker McKenzie and the National Network for Youth. This hotline is open every Wednesday from 12 to 8 Eastern, or 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 10 to 6 Mountain, or 9 to 5 Pacific. So we're going to provide an overview of the hotline. We're going to talk about the barriers that young people face when trying to access their vital documents. We're going to provide some guidance about, provide information about what information the hotline provides. And then we have a document, a policy brief that we're going to be releasing today that will include some initial data of findings and impacts about our hotline. And then we're going to reserve a good chunk of time to answer questions at the end. So again, please put your questions that you have in Q&A throughout our time together. So I will introduce myself now. I'm one of your speakers, Darla Bardine. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of the National Network for Youth. Our other speaker today is Jacqueline Pampel. She's partner and director of the North American Pro Bono Baker McKenzie. She'll be talking more about herself and the work of Baker McKenzie in a little bit. But Jacqueline is also a member of the board of directors at the National Network for Youth, and we've been proud to partner with Baker McKenzie for many years now. So for those of you who are not familiar with the National Network for Youth, we are on a mission to transform systems so that no young person in America experiences homelessness. We do this through federal policy advocacy, through youth and young adult partnerships. We invest in young people with lived expertise of homelessness, and we also work directly with communities to advance community-based solutions. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Jacqueline.
Thank you so much, Darla, and thank you for the introduction. As Darla mentioned, my name is Jacqueline. I go by Jackie Pampel. And I have the great honor and pleasure of helping lead up our pro bono work at Baker McKenzie. Baker McKenzie, for anyone not familiar, is a global law firm. So we do legal work all across the globe on everything from corporate work to tax work, which is what I used to do, to big litigation and dispute matters on a global scale for companies. Where I sit in Baker McKenzie is solely in our pro bono practice, which means I help lead up and direct the work that we do with the community on issues that are particularly important to us as a firm and to our pro bono practice. I share with you a little bit about our mission because we really are about bringing teams and people together to solve big problems. And I can't think of a better example of that than this ID hotline. We have been working with the National Network for Youth for many years to really think about how do we address some legal issues and help young people get access to vital documents when they need help and support. If you want to flip to the next slide, a big reason for that for us comes out of the largest component of our pro bono work really is in the space of children's rights. And a big piece of that has been a legal resource tool that we began putting out about 10 plus years ago called the Homeless Youth Handbook. And the Homeless Youth Handbook is publicly available if you go to homelessyouth.org. It is a legal rights and information guide on all sorts of issues that young people who are homeless or at risk of being homeless may face. It covers everything from employment questions to public benefits to immigration questions to safety and stability questions. One of the chapters in each of the handbooks is focused on identification. And so it digs in deep from a state perspective on some of the issues that young people face when it comes to getting forms of legal identification. Coupling that handbook with the broader issues that we realize young people face, we realize that the substance of what's in that handbook isn't enough to solve the challenges that a lot of people face when it comes to getting a form of legal ID. And that is a short way of talking about how the legal ID hotline that we're talking about today was born. So I'd encourage you to take a look at homelessyouth.org, share it with folks. If you don't see your state on there, that just means it's not done or not yet in progress, but we're continuously rolling out new states all the time. And you're welcome to reach out to us too. I'll put our pro bono address in the chat feature for folks to reach out if there's a particular state they're interested in. But I'm going to kick it back over to Darla to talk a little bit about those barriers that young people face when it comes to getting forms of legal ID.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. So I'm going to cover what are the barriers that young people experiencing homelessness face when obtaining vital documents. So first, what is a vital document? So just briefly to cover, that's a birth certificate, government issued IDs, social security cards. These documents are essential for navigating everyday life in the United States. They're required to access housing, employment, healthcare, education, public benefits, transportation, financial institutions, and in some cases, food banks, we've learned over the years. So, unfortunately, young people experiencing homelessness face many barriers. Lack of existing documentation. If you're under the age of 18, often parent or guardian consent is required, lack of support for required signatures and verification, an inability to prove residency. There could be fees, and that the cost could be something that a young person can't pay. And there are often complex and inaccessible application processes when trying to access a vital document. So, some examples of some barriers. And it really varies by state, what the requirements are, what the fees are. But a birth certificate example, a cost of $15 could be a barrier. It could require a state ID, a passport, or a certificate of citizenship, additional information, a mailing address, mother's full and maiden name, father's full name. Young people might not have the money, the required identification, or know that additional information that is also required to get a copy. For a social security card, if you're a minor, if there's not a parent or a legal guardian, you need to call the Social Services Administration and navigate complex bureaucratic systems. If you're a young adult, and we say young adult, we mean someone 18 and older, with no mailing address, then you need an in-person appointment with an original copy of a state ID, passport, health insurance or medical record, or employee ID. And so in person means that a young person needs to be able to get to an in-person office, make an appointment. And then if approved, that Social Security card needs to be mailed somewhere to you. And so they need a mailing address on file where you would be able to actually get that mail. And then for real ID, you need the documentation of a birth certificate, a Social Security card, passport, or permanent resident card. And then for verification of Social Security, you need a physical card or pay stub with a Social Security number and two proofs of address. So I'm sure, just hearing all of these things, you can understand why this could be challenging for anyone experiencing homelessness, let alone a young person. Also, there are specific barriers that groups of young people experiencing homelessness. So some specific challenges, so transgender youth often need a court order for a legal name change. There needs to be medical documentation for a gender marker change in many cases, though a best practice is to allow changes without involving the courts and healthcare. Immigrant youth face language barriers, limited translation services, as well as inconsistent verification policies. Also, there's often uncertainty around immigration status. And also, a lot of immigrant youth just fear that the process will involve them with immigration enforcement. Also, unfortunately, a lot of young people who are experiencing homelessness are involved in the foster care system or juvenile legal system, often face theft, identity theft, and so they're just at an elevated risk of this group for their identity to be stolen, sometimes by a family member. It could be a foster parent or another adult that they live with. Also, young people with disabilities face barriers as well with managing the application process, managing and accessing the websites, which are very bureaucratic and not user-friendly. And if there are required in-person office visits that are often not accessible. And this is a quote from one of the young people with lived expertise that we work with. And this quote is in the publication that we are launching today. And William shares that life for a youth experiencing homelessness is already hectic enough. The challenges they face don't occur in isolation, they're layered on top of what are already chaotic and unstable living situations. Young people navigating homelessness are often focused on immediate survival, securing food, avoiding unsafe situations, and finding a place to sleep. Requiring them to complex bureaucratic processes, travel to agencies, or track down documents across state lines places an enormous burden on young people already stretched beyond their limits. And so with that, I am excited to announce that we have launched a new policy brief called Vital Documents, Helping Youth Experiencing Homelessness Access IDs, Birth Certificates, and Other Essentials for Stability. That link is available today, and we'll be kind of pushing it out broadly. Kayla will put the link in chat, but it also is clickable on this slide, and the slides will be available after the webinar. So I'm going to do just a little history of how we got to partner with Baker McKenzie on this Vital Document Hotline. So we've been working together for a long time. And mainly, through the American Bar Association and Baker McKenzie's Homeless Youth Handbooks, which they've been doing for years now. And we partner with young people with lived expertise of homelessness, like I had mentioned before, and that's called our National Youth Advisory Council. And it must have been 4 years ago now. So every year, our young people kind of share what are their top 3 kind of issues that they think the National Network for Youth should be focused on if we're really going to move the needle and make progress in preventing and ending homelessness for young people. And one of their top three issues was vital document access. All of them said it was just a major barrier for them to try to exit homelessness, get help, access safety. And so they told us that, like, the National Network for Youth needs to work on this issue. We need to resolve this vital document issue if we really want to address youth homelessness. I was like, this is a big task. But we really do try to take the lead of what our young experts tell us. So I had reached out, and that's when I started the conversation with Baker McKenzie, and I said, hey, we really need to do something to address this issue. Would you be willing to work with us? And obviously, Baker McKenzie said yes, and here we are. And we're very excited and grateful that Baker McKenzie said yes and was excited to partner with us on this work. And with that, I'm going to kick it to Jackie.
Awesome. Thanks, Darla. So, the hotline itself is essentially a free resource focused entirely on providing legal information to help young people navigate getting a form of legal ID. So, we are open for anyone from any state that wants to call us, and we tackle things like birth certificate questions, state IDs, social security cards. I've also handled a handful of questions for birth certificates out of the US. We get some questions on passports on occasion, driver's license. Whatever the scope is of the caller, we try to tackle that directly during the call that comes in. We're really looking at providing state-specific guidance where applicable. Obviously, if somebody is calling with a question about a passport, we're going to tackle that as well. We began back in 2025, and you can go back, or we began earlier this year in 2025. You can jump to the next slide, Darla. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the folks that are answering these calls. One of the reasons we decided to have this webinar is we had such a great amount of calls come in as well from professionals that work with homeless youth directly, that were asking us about this hotline, that wanted to make sure to screen it, that it was a safe resource for young people. And I love that. And Darla loved that. So we thought, let's do a webinar so we can share with folks a little bit about the point of the hotline, who the people are behind the phones, so that you can feel comfortable either calling in with a young person or having a young person call. All of the folks to date answering the phone are, to date, we have all legal professionals and attorneys from Baker McKenzie. So these are all my colleagues that I oversee on this hotline every Wednesday, including today, where I have an active chat going with my volunteers that are on the hotline. But these are all my colleagues that are coming in and volunteering their time. As I shared with Darla just a bit ago before we got started, we might have kicked off in July, but we've really started to hit our stride with excitement and knowledge from our volunteers who are really incredibly dedicated to this effort. During calls, when calls come in, folks on a Wednesday when we're open live, they're going to be calling and getting an answer from one of our volunteers, or they can text, and there's live volunteers that are there to answer questions via text as well. We also have the system set up, recognizing that Wednesdays don't work for everybody. So we have the system set up so that outside of business hours, folks are welcome to text in or call in and leave a message that can be answered by the next time we have volunteers online. Right now, we have folks on Mondays and Fridays that are set up to answer any of those texts or calls that have come in when nobody is staffing. We actually, after Thanksgiving, are going to start having shifts Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday because of the volume of calls that we're getting. So we'll have more volunteers available to handle any calls on the off days. One of the biggest questions we've been getting is whether someone needs to be experiencing homelessness to call. And although this has kind of been the target of this hotline, we welcome anyone who calls in to anyone that needs help to call in. So if you're working with a young person, they're not homeless, maybe they just need help and support. One of the good things about this hotline to date is that it's entirely funded by Baker McKenzie, so we're not subject to any kind of funding limitations about the population we serve. So we really just try to holistically help anyone that calls us on the off days or on the days where we're live to make sure that we're supporting the folks that call in as well. I actually helped someone that worked at a nonprofit the other day that had some questions she couldn't navigate. And that was important to me too, because I thought, let's help you so that you can help other people as well. Next slide, Darla. So now I want to talk a little bit about the type of guidance that the hotline provides, and you can flip to that next guidance piece of guidance. Let's talk about the training for our volunteers because, as I mentioned, a lot of folks called in to kind of learn more and understand more about what this hotline was all about. And so I want to share with you for a second about how we go about training our volunteers. So, to date, all of our volunteers are, as I mentioned, Baker McKenzie colleagues of mine. They all undergo training to serve as a volunteer in the hotline. So, we have a series of videos that Darla and I, as well as some of our other contacts, put together on using the hotline platform, but also more importantly, how to provide trauma-informed care for any callers that come in, how to help issues that young people are facing with regard to homelessness, how to tackle some of these complicated vital documents questions that they're coming in to answer. We give our volunteers an awful lot of resources on addressing vital identification questions. So we have a series of state-by-state resources that have been developed by our team. Actually, since we've launched the handbook, we've had some other pro bono teams and nonprofits share with us some of their resources. So our volunteers have so many resources at their fingertips to be able to address the questions that are coming in. Typically, when callers call in, it is a rare day, and I'll tell you this because I take a lot of these calls myself. It is a rare day that I can answer a question straight away like this. There are 50 states in this country, and ID questions are really complicated and really state specific. Every state's a little different. And so I'm always doing real-time research on the phone with young people, and my volunteers are doing the same. So we're looking for the most accurate information, be it through the local DMV site, if I'm looking for information on a state ID, or Vital Docs, if I'm looking for information about that. But that's all being done real time while folks are on the phone. In addition, we have volunteers, but we also, just for your comfort, we also have folks that are captains that help our volunteers every day. And these are volunteers that have been taking on shifts for many, many weeks and that have done several shifts. So they're there to help and support our volunteers. I pretty much sit behind the hotline every single Wednesday when it's happening so that if folks have really complicated questions, I can help them navigate those questions as well, making sure that we get the best information in the hands of the caller at the time they call in. You can go ahead and jump to the next slide, Darla. All right, so a couple frequently asked questions that come in that I want to address. And if there's other questions you have specifically about that hotline, I see some questions are popping in the Q&A feature. Please keep those coming. We're happy to address as many as we can during the Q&A component as well. So the first question is, where do we get our information? So the information that our volunteers are working from is a combination of resources that our team at Baker McKenzie has put together with a lot of other volunteers, as well as real-time research on the relevant websites for the organizations that issue these documents. Things change all the time. So my guidance to my volunteers is always use our resource, but double check that information on the state DMV site or the Vital Docs or Social Security. Always check that information real time. So combo of the work we did plus checking the websites real time. Second question, the personal information we need from callers, we try very hard to not take very much personal information from callers. And so we'll ask callers their name. Usually it's just first name that we're asking for. And then we will ask callers for a number where we can give them a call back. But we really are just asking them what issue they need help with that particular day. This ties in a bit to the third question on the slide, which is whether we complete the forms for young people. Without delving too deep into the ethics of legal representation, when young people call in as a information hotline, we're providing them information, we're providing them guidance, we're not acting in the shoes as their attorneys, which means that unless I take on a client directly through a separate process, on the hotline itself, I'm not completing forms for young people because I'm not representing myself as their attorney. I'm going to come back to that piece on the referral side as we get through this a little bit because there are some issues that are so challenging and difficult that young people do need attorneys. And that's a slightly separate path I'll go down in a few minutes. But for purposes of the main calls that are coming into the hotline. We don't take people's social security number. We don't take their birth date. We don't take their last name. We don't take any of their additional details. We just want their name and their phone number in case we need to call them back. Um, and help guide them in the right direction. The next question is, are there age limitations for helping callers? There is none. As I said before, we're funding this hotline out of our pro bono budget at Baker McKenzie, which means we don't have those funding limitations on the young people that we can serve. And so we'll ask young people their age because it's often relevant. Typically, when you're looking at vital documents, it's very different rules for if you're under 18 versus over 18. So we'll ask young people their age, but we don't have age limitations. Again, we take folks as they come when they call in. Next question, do you provide guidance for changing a legal name and gender marker? Yes, absolutely. That's part of the guidance and the documentation that our team has, and they'll work through those questions with young people as they come in. Next question, do you provide guidance for those with different immigration statuses? Yes, 100%. I will caveat that to say, though, that we are not an immigration hotline. And I do a fair amount of immigration work on my own, and that is not, we can't provide immigration guidance itself on this hotline because folks just simply aren't trained to do that. We do have a list of resources of immigration organizations, and if there's a homeless youth handbook in your state, that has an immigration chapter as well as a lot of other legal aid organizations if folks have things that are more substantive about immigration. But as far as providing documents and navigating whether somebody can get a state ID if they're undocumented, yes, our team does that as well. Um, what happens if we're unable to provide the guidance that a young person needs? That is a tricky question, and we're going to go through some of the findings to date. But one of the things that we have found so far is that about 80-ish% of calls, maybe more like 85% of the calls, we're able to handle, get folks going in the right direction, get them the information they need to get that document. In about the 15% of situations where it's just a more complicated issue than we're able to deal with on the phone. Great example of this is I was taking a call the other day, and I have a young person who was born in the Philippines and needs a birth certificate from the Philippines. That's not something they've been able to do on their own. Thankfully, we actually have staff in the Philippines, so we offered to take on this young person's case directly and act as their attorney, which means my colleague serves as their attorney. We put together an engagement letter, which is just a legal document that says we'll act as your attorney for no cost on this issue. And we're helping her right now get that birth certificate from the Philippines. I've also referred some cases out to, we have other in-house partners. So those are lawyers that work at corporations that have been interested in helping out with the legal hotline. At some point, I'm hoping to integrate them as the volunteers as well. But some of the in-house partners have been willing to take individual cases. We have one client that actually has some really good touch points in Puerto Rico. And so they've taken on some cases in Puerto Rico for us to help get birth certificates. Other examples of that are there's some nonprofits that do really phenomenal work in their locations when it comes to birth certificates. So a shout out to the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, which always helps us when we're having trouble getting somebody a birth certificate from Illinois. So one of the things we are definitely looking for is to build out a referral network for some of those more complicated cases. So we'll share a little bit more with that with you at the end. And if you go in the resources tab, you'll see how you can share with us if you know of an organization or if you are an organization that can maybe help young people directly. Those would be those more complicated cases where we can't help people at that moment on the call, but really need help and support for them after. So please join our referral network. And then the last question, common question that we get is whether we can help people with cost if there's no waiver and the young person can't cover it. So I'm going to say several, but it's probably less than several states, there are specific provisions for young people to be able to get copies of vital documents like a birth certificate and things of that nature if they are qualified as homeless. And there's usually a form that a shelter can fill out to help them do that. That can be a challenging process. It doesn't always work, and that doesn't exist in every state. So, one of the things we've been doing, and I'm hoping to find a better pathway to do this in the future, but right now, what we've been doing is if a young person calls from a nonprofit or a shelter and they don't have the funding to get that vital doc, we can make a small contribution to that shelter or nonprofit to cover the cost of that. So we've been making those donations straight away, and we've done that more than a handful of times because if that's the only barrier that a young person has to getting a legal ID, we want to help solve it. So we're trying to figure out an even better way than making those donations to nonprofits and shelters, but that's what we've been doing to date in order to help young people with that particular barrier. So, as you can probably tell by a lot of the things that I'm sharing with you, we learn as we go here. So, this is a very big endeavor. And as Darla mentioned, it took us a couple years to really figure out how do we do this best to serve the community in the ways that we want to serve the community. And we keep learning as we go. So if you have specific other questions or other issues you know come up, please keep adding those in the Q&A. Darla, if you want to go ahead and jump to the findings and the impacts, you can jump to the first slide. So we've had a chance to take a little bit of a deep dive into the data so far about about the people that are calling the hotline. And what we're finding is it's a real mix between the people that are calling in and who is seeking the help. So about 35% of the callers right now are youth under the age of 26 who are calling in to get help with a vital document. About 40% of our calls are providers or social workers calling on behalf of a young person or with a young person. And both of those scenarios are fine. We're happy to talk to young people directly. We're happy to also talk to a provider or social worker with a young person or help a provider that's just trying to navigate to help a young person. All of those scenarios are absolutely fine. In about 25% of our calls, callers may not have specified where it is that they're calling from or their age, and that's completely fine. I tell our volunteers, it's a question I want you to ask, but if folks don't want to say where they're calling from, that's completely fine. Our goal is to get information in the hands of people that need it. A lot of the youth that we are talking to so far, about roughly 40% of our callers to date are under the age of 18. And helping young people who don't have a connection to a parent or guardian under the age of 18 get an ID is very challenging depending on each of the states. So these are probably the cases, the situations where we're seeing more and more young people that really need help and support. I was on the hotline as a volunteer maybe about 2 weeks ago and had three separate calls with young people who described to me how they were under the age of 18, kicked out of their house, and their parent is holding on to their documents and won't give them to them. So, in each of those cases, we were able to find nonprofits in that community that were able to help them directly navigate the issue. But that unfortunate incidence comes up more and more. And every time I do a hotline call to young people that are really struggling, especially under the age of 18, when a lot of the rules in vital documents almost assume that you're going to have that access to a parent or guardian. And when that parent or guardian is the barrier and the problem, it's a real challenge. So those are young people that their issues are often a little bit more challenging than the 18 to 26-year-old group, which is about 60% of those young people call in, is asking for help getting their vital IDs. Maybe the same issue is the under 18 group. Maybe they left home and don't have access. A lot of young people leaving the foster care system and either don't have connection with anyone in it still and have not gotten any form of legal ID. And so these are great examples of just, we take folks as they come. So whoever it is that's coming into the hotline, those are the questions we're going to address and try to help them real time. Darla, you can go ahead and jump to the next slide. So what is it that callers are calling about and needing most frequently? So most often it's a birth certificate. And the reason for the birth certificate is because quite often a birth certificate is really that threshold document to help you get any other form of ID. So in I think about 20%, if I'm looking at this graph right, a little under 20% of young people, we've been asking them, have you already had this document and you somehow don't have it anymore? That could either be because a parent or guardian kept it. That could be because their social worker kept it. That could be because they lost it, especially in the incidents of youth experiencing homelessness that are living a more transient life. They can't always get access to that document or they may have lost it. That doesn't really change the scope of what it means to get a birth certificate because at its core, it's still a copy. But so often, in order to get a state ID, in order to get a social security card, in order to get a driver's license or a permit, so often you need that birth certificate. So that's why so many folks are calling about birth certificates. A lot of folks want that form of state ID. We know state IDs and driver's license, especially in the world of real IDs, are so incredibly important to let young people navigate in the world. And so state IDs are a huge component. And social security cards, quite often that is because young people are also trying to get jobs and find some level of stability. We've gotten a lot of tips and tricks from some of the nonprofits that have shared with us some of the forms of documents that they have successfully used to get social security cards. So if you're listening to this and in your jurisdiction you have a tip or trick for us, not only join our referral network, but tell us because one of the things I have found, not just through this hotline, but we beta tested this a couple years ago and did a quick session with Covenant House New York. And one of the things we found is that Covenant House New York had some specific relationships with the local DMV branch to be able to provide some documents to help young people. And there's a lot of those relationships and a lot of those things that happen because people are trying to help young people. We want to know about them because the more we know, the better that we can help the young people that are calling in and need our legal help and support. If you want to go to that next slide, because the person that just put in the chat asking about the legal referral network just absolutely hit my timing here. So we are building out that legal referral network. And if you go in the resources section, we've set up a quick Google form that allows you to just put in your information if you are an organization that might be able to take cases. And if you have limitations, if you say, yes, we can take on cases, but only under the age of 18 and only for folks in my particular county, whatever the case is, that is incredibly helpful as we start figuring out how to get some of these bigger challenges grappled for young people. I also see in just the things that are popping up on the chat, a lot of y'all are sharing tips and tricks, sharing resources. We're going to capture those. We want to keep adding those and really make a more publicly facing site, as well as the document Darla is going to talk about in just a second, to make sure that you all have access to that information as well. We have a public facing source that we put out called the I Am Here website, and I'll put it in the chat just as soon as I kick it over to Darla. But it includes some deep dive legal resources on finding forms of legal ID. It was a research project that we just started actually out of the US. We're going to keep adding US jurisdictions to that as we kind of work through this first year of the hotline because we're learning so much. But we'll make sure as things go forward that folks have access to that as well. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to my great friend and partner in this effort, Darla Bardine, to talk a little bit about the written resources, and then we'll pop it over to questions. So keep those coming.
Thank you. First, let me say how amazing Jackie and Baker McKenzie are. I mean, the story she's sharing, taking on clients, helping folks get a birth certificate from the Philippines, the fact that they have completely funded and staffed this hotline. They're amazing. I wish we could all just like clap from where we are and just thank Baker McKenzie so much because it's so needed. So there is a resources section in this webinar world that I cannot see. And if you click on it, you'll find all the links to everything that we've been talking about. Also, Kayla just put in chat a link to our webpage that provides information about the hotline. And so if you go to the resources, you'll find the link to our new publication, Vital Documents, as well as the link to the Google form, because we really are trying to build out that referral network so that we know who to refer young people to who do need more support than a phone call or a text conversation can provide. Also, I've been seeing this question coming in. We do have a communications toolkit that Kayla, our amazing comms person, put together. There are flyers you can print out and hang up. There's social media tiles you can use. There's frequently asked questions. There's sample text for like a newsletter or social media text. So please check out the website, download, print, hang flyers, all of that. And now I'm gonna kick it to Q&A. I would say like there's one bucket of questions, Jackie, where every state wants their own homeless youth handbook. And so I don't know if I should ask, specific states. Are there states in process right
Yes.
now? So maybe you could talk about that to just kind of answer those group of questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Darla. Yes, we do have states in process right now. The state in for Maine, we are working on finalizing that handbook, and I anticipate that one will be launched in the first quarter of next year. We also have handbooks in process for Virginia, Mississippi, and Nevada at the moment. We have a list of states. I mean, our big goal is to create a homeless youth handbook for every single state. And our goal with these homeless youth handbooks is to never let the handbook stay as a static resource. We try to do a full holistic update of that about every 2 years. So we're currently doing an update for our Florida handbook as well as our New Jersey handbook. Each of these handbooks take, I'm going to just on a conservative side, say about 1,000 or more hours of pro bono time from volunteers to get these accomplished. So we're always looking for a nonprofit in the state that does legal aid work specifically with homeless youth because we really want these handbooks driven by experts in the local community. So if you're thinking, hey, I really want a handbook in my state and I know of this organization that would be a great partner, please send it to me at pro bono at bakermckenzie.com. That's a quick and easy way to reach me. We're always partner up with in-house companies as well because they're such big efforts. We really want to also help build a network in the state of other folks that are focused and invested in issues related to homeless youth. I get the great honor and pleasure of going to Tulsa, Oklahoma in the first 2 weeks of December to really talk about the launch of our homeless youth handbook for Oklahoma, which just recently launched. And we've got a couple last chapters we're putting up there in advance of that event. But every single time we launch a handbook, you just hear how much people really need this resource and how valuable it is. So you're welcome to reach out to me. I try to get through as many homeless youth handbooks as I possibly can get every single year, but we're always trying to really make states as priorities when we know those states need those handbooks, even more so than maybe another state. So that's my long answer, but feel free to reach out to us at pro bono at bakermckenzie.com, and I'd love to chat with you and explore those handbooks as we go forward.
Great. I see a lot of state suggestions here
Awesome.
in chat. And then another question about rather than like a youth shelter providing confirmation, could a McKinney-Vento confirm like homelessness status? I think that refers to like fee for states that have fee waivers if you're experiencing homelessness. Because I think it is broader than a youth shelter. It could be a McKinney-Vento liaison
Mhm.
or yeah.
Yeah, I think I am in the last couple calls I've had where I've dealt with this issue, most times the the young people have been in a shelter, so that's kind of been our focal point. But I believe that is correct. But if you have a specific question about your state, please call us or text us at the hotline. The other thing I should mention about the hotline is as we continue ramping up our capacity, we have volunteers every day. We have, I think, about 8 different shifts that we run. So there's usually 1 to 2 volunteers available at a time. So you may call in while we're live and not get a live person, and that just means there's lots of calls coming in. I anticipate starting early next year, we're going to offer more and more shifts for the legal ID hotline so that we can continue to expand our capacity each and every day. But please leave that message if you don't get somebody live and know that one of our folks will get back to you just as soon as they wrap with the caller in front of them.
There's also a question about publishing in Spanish. I don't know if that's a handbook question
Yeah.
hotline, but is there?
Let me address both, Darla, actually.
Yeah.
So on the handbook side, we have some states that I think it's the state of Florida right now that is published in Spanish, and we are working with our team. So the handbook website is basically a Baker McKenzie, website that our firm maintains. So right now, what we're looking at in order to really scale this is use some of the translate tools on the handbook site as well. So I have our team looking at that currently so we can offer a lot more languages. The Florida handbook translation was actually done by a group of high school students under the guidance of my colleagues in Mexico, but was done as a direct translation by folks that know the language. And that was so incredibly valuable, but really, really hard to scale that more broadly. And so since a lot of these translation tools have gotten better, my team is kind of um, I would say trouble checking to see what that looks like and see if that's something that we're going to be able to put on the handbook. But my hope is next quarter, next year, that's something that we can add to it. As far as the hotline goes, right now our hotline is only in English. What I've been contemplating, because we have so many colleagues that speak Spanish and because we have so many colleagues actually in our Mexico office that want to help and support, is next year maybe offering one or two Spanish language days. That's TBD on when we're going to do that. We just have to figure out how to make that happen. But we've got a lot of folks with language capacity and a lot of needs. So that's something that's on our radar for sure to try to make happen sometime next year as well.
And people have been asking, yes, the slides and this recording will be available on our website afterwards. And we'll also send it out to everybody who registered. We'll send out an email with a link to the recording and the slides as well. And then there's a question about how to get a donation to help a young person get a vital document. They should call the hotline, right?
100%, yes.
Call the hotline. Okay, what other
And you
questions?
can text as well. We've said that a couple times, and we have a lot more callers than texters, but either way is absolutely fine. I've been trying to think of a better way because cost is such a barrier for some of the young people, especially when young people come call in on their own. And because I can make contributions, to support legal issues that shelters and nonprofits are facing, I have been doing that out of with some of the funds from our pro bono budget that we have set aside for the ID hotline. I haven't thought of a better pathway yet to be able to make those direct contributions to young people, but it's something we're exploring and think about. And if you have a suggestion or idea or something else you've seen, please shoot me a note.
Awesome. Other folks are asking kind of specific questions, and I would recommend calling the hotline. Um,
Yeah, and I would say about that too, Darla. We're telling y'all to call the hotline because most of these questions really are very complicated and very state and resource and fact specific, which is why when calls come in, I had originally envisioned that calls would come in, we'd be able to answer them really quickly, folks would get off the line. That does happen on occasion, but more than not, really what's happening is our team of lawyers is researching the answer to that question. I don't know of anyone that's an expert in vital documents in all 50 states. Darla and I both know a lot, and I would say I'm definitely far from an expert. I don't know if you would say you are too, Darla, but we are not
far from an
experts.
expert,
So
yeah.
we're doing the best we can to find those answers real time, which is why we're saying, hey, call or text the hotline. Both on Wednesdays, but on the days where we have folks that are available to kind of return calls because we really want to do your question justice and make sure that we're viewing it in the full context of the facts and the legal issues and the issues and the different requirements of what is entailed.
And there was a question like, so if a young person isn't connected to a nonprofit, I mean, I think we could refer them to a nonprofit to get connected to resolve a cost issue. That's kind of part of why
Mhm.
we're building out like the referral network for legal services, but also, the national network for youth. We represent, hundreds of youth homelessness providers across the country. So I I don't think we would allow that to be a barrier. We would get them connected to some, nonprofit, so that we could cover their cost and
Yep.
make sure they can get it. Yeah.
Yeah, that referral network is so crucial, and we've had so much good help and support so far from organizations. Um, Of course, the organizations that we're connected with through the Homeless Youth Handbook, of course, the national networks, broad group of organizations has been incredibly helpful. But we know there's so many folks out there doing amazing work in each community. And we want to know who you are because we want to make sure young people in your community that need help and support more than we're able to get on the hotline, or it's more complex than what can be helped on the hotline. We want to get them in the right direction. So keep those coming.
Okay. Um, have we done advocacy at the state level? Um, so we partner with Schoolhouse Connection. Schoolhouse Connection does a lot of state, they actually have full-time focus on trying to improve state laws around Vital Doc and ID access. 100%. So Schoolhouse Connection has resources. And also, we did partner with the American Bar Association, Commission on Homelessness and Poverty, and there is model state legislation. So there's I don't know if we have time to find the link and put it here, but there's a model state statute publication that we helped put together with the American Bar Association. And one of the model state statutes that is included does address vital document access at the state level. And so, we're happy to support kind of state advocates in moving through those types of state laws, and we have the model legislation. So we've done kind of as much as we could. We'd love to do more to be able to support states more. We don't currently, our team doesn't currently have the capacity to do more than we're doing now. Oh, Trinity, thank you. Trinity put in chat the model state statute publication that we partnered with the American Bar Association on.
Awesome.
Oh, and thank you, Schoolhouse Connection. The link in there about Schoolhouse Connection's amazing work. Are there any other questions we missed, Kayla?
No, I think we got all the big ones. I
Okay,
know some of you guys had issues with the resource links. We'll be following up with all the links that were shared today.
And
awesome.
I will say too, our goal in doing this webinar was to really make sure folks knew more of what we were about as a team, especially as you're sending your young folks to us to make sure you felt comfortable with the resource. You are also welcome to always call in the hotline if you have more specific questions or you just want to learn more. We've got volunteers trained to help. I've shared with you our pro bono email address. Just note in there that it's ID hotline related, and our team that monitors that inbox will make sure it gets to me. But please do just know that, we're a resource here to help, and we're learning as we go, and we're growing every single day. So we appreciate your feedback, appreciate your questions, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have more of them.
Thank you, Jackie. And we love Schoolhouse Connection. So we are actually doing a federal policy webinar with them tomorrow. You get the latest updates on what's happening around child, youth, and family homelessness policy. So please register to join us. Also, you'll see Schoolhouse Connection and Baker McKenzie at our national summit on youth homelessness and Hill Day in March 12th to the 13th, 2026. Schoolhouse Connection does the education track. Baker McKenzie is a sponsor and also presenting at a breakout session. And I believe Jackie's also going to have flyers that folks can take about the hotline and other resources there at the hotline that you all can take back and use and hang up in your offices and around programs and where young people are. So we hope you will join us. We have a new cohort that we're launching for our youth action leadership certificate. It is for young people, young leaders with lived experience that builds their skills around advocacy, developing partnerships, how systems work, accessing funding, administration, project management, facilitation. So if you're interested, you can shoot an email and find out more information. Again, thank you to Jackie and Baker McKenzie for going above and beyond to make this hotline happen. We're so proud to partner with you. If folks continue to have questions, my email is here and we will get back to you. And thank you all. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.